Who's here for the talk? The talk about a kind of an Australian dude walking the length of Britain. Who's here for that? Okay, cool. So the thing about that is that every talk is secretly a ceremony that hasn't matured yet. I'm Matthew. I'm walking the spine of Albion, stirring cultural renaissance and calling forward the emerging leaders of this age.
The tables have started to turn, serving my revolution. Oh, no.
Dong. Dong. Ding dong. Ding dong. The breath rises and falls. That all things rise and fall. The waves rise and fall. The sun rises and falls. Civilization rises and falls. And we move through dimensions, into higher dimensions, into higher frequencies, into dings, and then we come back down dimensionally into dongs. And that even though so much of what has been remembered by the generations before has been that we are either going up or we are going down. And while many beings and many lineages hold point for the up or the down, we are going to continue to rise and fall forever. In whatever form we are, we will go higher and lighter, and then we will come down into darker and heavier, denser. And we do that because of love, because the light loves the dark, and the dark loves the light. The feminine loves the masculine, and the masculine loves the feminine, and we are eternally magnetized towards the other part of ourselves. And that's the spiral of life, and it is the ongoing, everlasting love, and it is the mysteries journey through the cosmos, through time, through whatever eternity is. So we're not just headed up and we're not just headed down. We are like wave forms rising and falling. And we're all of it forever. Whether we're in these bodies or whether we find ourselves at a later stage in lighter bodies, or at a later stage again in denser bodies like rocks, like stones. And everything is welcome, and everything has its place in the stages and the cycles of it all. And everything is a piece of us. It's all home.
I've been expecting you, Mr. Bond.
All you see happening for you perfectly. You are loved here. You are seen. And in this moment, as you breathe, may you return to me. Only knowing is required.
You know how you stumble across things online and you're like, I feel like there's a bit of love over there. Or like, that person's actually like genuinely doing something with like a love and a care and a willingness. And yeah, I feel that this place and the prayer in it and the devotion that it is given to it, like the hours and the time and the holding, is actually a pretty special thing. And so, 3 years ago I saw her online, or she saw me online, and we've been aware of each other in the distance. And I just met her for the first time after 3 years, just then. We had our first little cuddle, which was really lovely. And yeah, it's really nice to, they say that some whales can hear each other across an entire ocean, over 500 miles. That's how far their song carries. In some ways, to me, it feels like it's a little bit of that for us. Sometimes in the online world, something over there! And it's really lovely over months and years to find our way to those places. Oftentimes we have to do something a little longer than is comfortable. No use talking about loving the land underneath our feet if we can't love the land of our bodies, even though the world kind of tells us to go over it, to ignore it, to medicate it, going into the soreness, being honest about the soreness is actually really essential for us to really rest into our bodies, into this lifetime.
Perfectly still.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Perfectly uniform. Perfectly still. Here in this moment, we are welcoming.
Who's here for the talk? The talk about a kind of an Australian dude walking the length of Britain. Who's here for that? Okay, cool. So the thing about that is that every talk is secretly a ceremony that hasn't matured yet. And so if you could just all give me like a hum, like this. when I was 3 years old, my mother gave birth to twins, and they were these beautiful little angelic, blonde-haired, pure, just, I remember thinking it was the first time I really loved something. I loved my brothers as a 3-year-old. Loved my brothers. And I remember thinking, it must have been one of my first thoughts as a toddler, like my first kind of grown human thoughts. I was like, I'm gonna look after these kids for the rest of my life. I'm gonna love my brothers forever and do whatever it takes to look after them. Has anyone ever loved something so much that they would do whatever it takes to look after them? Come on, give me a proper hand raise. Like, yeah. Yeah. So you know that feeling. I had that as a 3-year-old. And it was really fully formed in me as a 3-year-old, actually. I don't know how, but that's how it played out. And when my father and mother split when I was 5 or 6 years old, and I became the oldest male in the house. You know, one of those stories. And that same love was inside me. I'll do whatever it takes to love and look after my brothers. So it didn't take long before I began to kind of realize that the world that you and I were born into had kind of lost its way a bit. And I remember at a really early age realizing that there was a bit of a spell that the world I was born into was under. Has anyone had that moment at any point in their lives where they kind of realize there's a little bit of a spell or a little bit of a, give me another hand here, I'm kind of Tony Robbins-ing you. That's where I come from. Yeah. So I realized I was young, I was little when I kind of like connected to the spell, when I connected to I kind of touched in with this idea that something wasn't quite right. And between this idea that something wasn't quite right and my love for my brothers, it was like the ingredients for a pretty wild life. Something's not right in the world or something's not quite lining up, and I would die for these beings. That's the recipe that kind of cooked me into my teenage years, into my adulthood. As a 13-year-old, I'm just kind of putting pieces in the cauldron here and stirring it to kind of build the recipe of why this walk came to be. As a 13-year-old, my grandma pulled me aside and she said, she said it like, she sounded like she was giving me an option, but grandmas don't really give you an option. You know, she's like, come spend 6 weeks with me over your school holidays and help me turn our family tree put it on the computer. She had books and books of the family tree. And like I said, you know, she asked me, but she had the grandma look in her eyes that was like, no, I gotta do this. So I did it. Leading up to my 13th birthday, I spent 6 weeks in a closed room with early days computers, helping my grandmother turn our family tree from all these books into a coherent computer family tree. You guys know what I'm talking about when I say that, right? Like those computer family trees where they link everything up and you see the story in all different directions. And so I bathed in my grandma's passion for her family, for her lineage, for her ancestry. And I absorbed her love for our family. And I absorbed her passion for the story that led to us. And amongst it all, I became really present to this little isle on the other side of the world called Britain. And it just kept showing up everywhere in the tree. You know, Britain this, Britain, I really kind of got to see my story. And it was the Britain and Irish side of things that were really strongly her personal line. So I kind of got initiated into my ancestry, bathing in my grandmother's passion for this isle and the people who live here. And even though it was just like turning a book into like a computer sense-making diagram, it was an initiation. It was as close to an initiation into my ancestry as has happened in my life. My grandma pulled me aside and inducted me into our ancestry. It's pretty cool when you think about it. So all the grandmas out there, just little walks. And maybe in a world that was a bit more grown, as I was turning 13 and my grandmother's pulling me aside to walk me through our ancestry. Perhaps the sisters, the girls who were 12 and 13 and 14 who were kind of growing up with me, perhaps they would have been pulled aside by their grandmothers and aunties to talk about their bleed, to talk about their kind of coming into womanhood, but that wasn't happening at that time. It's only just kind of stirring now, isn't it, in a deeper way. So my love for my brothers, my grandmother initiating me into my ancestry, and my awareness of this place on the other side of the world that was a part of my story. I remember thinking, okay, Britain, not right now, but someday. Not right now, but someday, as a 13-year-old. There was many moments over the course of my life where I thought, not right now, but I am coming. So I used to speak to you guys, all of you guys, and go, not yet, but it's coming, I'm coming. Just wait a little bit longer. I got to grow a little bit longer for me to be ready for you and for you to be ready for me. So these are some of the beginnings of the love stirring in me. My grandfather died in December. His name was Desmond John. Love you to say his name, Desmond John. Just feel it.
Desmond John.
Desmond John. When you look at me, you can see whispers of him in my nose. You can see whispers of him on my shoulders, the hair on my chest, the hair on my back. You can see whispers of him in the way I talk about family, the love I have for family. He is my grandfather, and he passed. And I loved him, really loved him. I still do. The role of the grandfather, the role my grandfather played with my absent father was really powerful, really important for me. I couldn't afford to get back to his funeral. It was like £6,000 flights around Christmas time. It was like really expensive. So I joined online, which I thought was going to be awful, but actually was really beautiful. Those same little brothers that I spoke about me loving are now men, and they held the ceremony well. Yeah, I felt really proud getting to see my brothers hold that ceremony. After the ceremony, it was like 6 a.m. in the morning. I'd stayed up all night to watch it. And I was sitting there, just like on my bed, with my arms out, 6 a.m. in the morning, in the ritual field of my grandfather's passing, and in the moment of like, just cracked, really cracked by the whole experience, proud of my brothers, connected to my grandfather, cracked by the ceremony of it all. And one of the beautiful things about rituals of all kinds is that they bring us into contact with the honesty and the truth. And maybe you could say that God finds God's way through the cracks, or the ancestors find their way through the cracks, or the love finds its way through the cracks. And in the ritual moment following my grandfather's ceremony, I was penetrated by a telling, a message. It doesn't come through like words, it comes through like instant. It's the instant knowing. I relate to it as a sacred call. And was told, is one way to say it, that I had to walk the spine of Albion from the southern tip of the Isle of Wight all the way to the northern tip in Durness in northern Scotland, and that it wasn't supposed to just be about me. I was supposed to stir the good kind of trouble as I did it. And I was like, no, well, no, I was like on my bed in like grandfather ritual, what? No. Oh, no. Okay, must just be a thing. Still there. No. I don't want to. It wasn't just like, you got to do it at some point. It's like, you got to go. You have to do this thing now. And I was like, but I'm broke. Like, I'm just in a kind of one of those dip moments in life right now. I'm properly in it. I can't afford to do that. That makes no sense. I can't do that. It's like, you do that. You do it. And I'm like, I've been in like a body breakdown for 15 months. I had a really bad meniscus tear that sent my nervous system into a kind of a state of shock. And I've been struggling to get downstairs at home. This was December. I've been struggling to walk. I couldn't get out of bed. I spent like 90% of my days in bed for like 15 months. Proper like kind of a chronic illnessy kind of thing. My something about the knee and the nerves really kind of like debilitating me. And it's like, I know, but you have to go. I'm like, but I'm fat. I haven't been able to exercise for 8. It's going to be so heavy and hard. And it's like, you gotta go. So I sat with it for a few days. Was there any other excuses I had? I was really good at making excuses. And every time I came back to it, it was just like, nah, you gotta do it. I don't care if it was God or ancestors or whatever. It was life trying to crack me, trying to enter me, trying to enter into my existence. And whatever I came back with, it was just no. And so I knew I had to do this thing. On December 31st, I sent a I let the wider community know that in a month's time, I was going to begin walking the spine of Albion from starting at Isle of Wight up the coast, up the centre of the Isle. And I just kind of said it. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have the resources. I didn't have the finances, the equipment. I didn't have any of it. But I declared it. So it was very scary to kind of declare it, very humbling to be like, I have to do this and I'm going to need support. And can you help me? Yeah, very humbling and necessary. Those humblings are necessary, aren't they? They're a part of it as well. I made this radical declaration and then I had to kind of like live up to it. And it's, yeah. And I was like, my body was sick and I didn't have the finances, and the day I set out, the answers still hadn't come in a lot of things, and I hadn't really planned the way other than I knew I'd read up on and I just had this kind of inner call towards the spine of Albion. Like a line of sacred places up the centre of Britain. And it's called the spine of Albion. And the word Albion in the name spine, Albion is the ancient name of Britain. It is really likely that Albion was the name given to this isle by the people who first lived here. That Albion was actually what those who knew these lands called it. What happens with kind of like colonization events all around the world at different points is a new kind of force comes in and they know a thing for a moment and they give it a name. Like in my ceremonial welcome at the beginning, I said that my river is called the Maribakula, the Mabula, the Bula, the Mary. And so the Maribakula, these are names that the Aboriginal Australians
built up over like hundreds of thousands of generations of intimacy with the river. That's the Maribakula. They know the river. They get to know it. They get to feel it. You know, they know it's like naming a baby without kind of having a relationship with it, or having a sense of the soul of the thing. You know, and so yeah, that people just come in and name things. When there was a colonization event in Australia, they came in and they called that river within about 15 minutes the Mary, named after some woman. So they put a name onto the thing rather than listening to the name that is of the thing. And so the name that was listened to for this isle by those who lived here for generations was Albion. For me, it feels like a soulful name for these isles. The sound of it, Albion, feels like my sense of the people in some ways. It feels like a very soulful name. So the spine of Albion is a honoring to this ley line that runs up the center of Britain, and it's an honoring of the ancient soul of this isle and these people. The spine of Albion. And it draws me, it calls me, something about us, our family, our human family, finding our spine. You can say that in the 60s, there was a flourishing, there was a rainbow-coloured arrival. There was all sorts of beauty and magical cosmic touching, but it was a people who didn't know their spine. There wasn't a solidness. They almost didn't know their story. They were united with everything, but they didn't know who they were. And so when you don't have your spine, you can fall over quite easy, or the wind can kind of blow you. It's like a tree without roots. You know, it doesn't stand up to much strong wind. And so while the 60s was connected to the expansiveness, and I'm talking about like the hippie movement and the introduction of all sorts of supportive medicines, and you guys know what I'm talking about when I say the 60s, right? That's pretty, okay. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say the 60s? There was like this wave of like really wild adults, is one way to put it. But the spine wasn't there. And we're in another wave right now, aren't we, in the Western world? There's another wave of renaissance and emergence, another wave of relationship building with the land, another wave of connecting with each other. But this time round, we need our spine. This time round, we need the thing that doesn't blow us over. So we need to know our story, and we need to know who we are. We need to kind of have our identity, and we need to be proud in some way of who we are. I've been touched by the Maoris and the First Nations Australians really deeply, and like the Maori haka. I remember growing up being like, "Where's my haka? Like, where's my tribal, fierce strength?" You know, maybe I'm a bit of a Maori-shaped being as well. You know, like that's a bit of my nature. But I'm like, I know inside myself that my people have a form of that. So we're kind of finding our way to it right now. And this walk up the spine of Albion is a prayer for things like that. I've walked not just through beautiful landscapes, not just along mountain ridges or through like wildflower fields. I've walked through rivers full of rubbish, and I've walked through 100 miles of A road with cars whooshing, and I've walked through heaps of tires and litter just kind of thrown out of nowhere. I've walked through people with their heads down and their shoulders down, syringes beside bus stops. Not just the beauty, not just the woodlands, not just the woods, but the reality of where we're at. And it's not just, but that haka I spoke about, where's mine? It's not just the haka. It's like the pilgrimages. Where do people of these lands go to pilgrimage? Camino, or they duck over to Europe to do something in Europe. There is things here, but the fire's not turned up all the way yet. So the pilgrimages come back when we start to walk them, and the first pilgrimages will be through the rubbish, and it will be through the tires, and it's not going to be just like beautiful. It's going to be honest. This is where we're at, not just like some avoidant like, oh yeah, it's like glorious. All of it is glorious. It is bloody glorious, but it's also effed. I would use different language, but there's kids in the room. It's also pretty wildly effed. And that's good. It's good that I get to feel that. It's good that I get to be cracked by the syringes. It's good that I get to feel the tires. That's the pilgrimage of our time. That's what it takes in this time to really know the place as it is. Not as the fantasy of it, but as it is. So part of why I'm walking this thing is to breathe life back into the pilgrimages and the rituals and the hakas and the dances and the songs that are going to emerge over the next 2-3 generations. They're already arriving. They're already revealing themselves. Somewhere like this hub is holding space for like continued curious listening humans coming together over and over and over again. And in the field of that, it just naturally emerges. It just naturally emerges. At some point we go, we've been doing this thing for quite a while. I think it might be time for the next thing. And then we move into the next thing. And then after a while, a few seasons, we've been doing this thing for a while. I think it's time we move on to the next thing. And we naturally move through the spiral. And as we kind of move, we begin to touch these places. So I kind of I see myself as being out there kind of like, I think we're going this way, guys. You know, like, come on. And at the heart of it, I'm kind of throwing a challenge down to the next generation. I'm like, walk further than me and walk better than me. And that's kind of how we do it. That each generation is like in direct communication with the generation before by how we live our lives and how we choose to move through life. So that's why I choose to walk, throwing down a challenge to the next generation and standing on the shoulders of those who've come before. One of my mentors, Mac McCartney, the Children's Fire, if any of you know him, he's like an elder figure. And do you know Mac McCartney? Anyone know Mac McCartney? You guys know Mac? Yeah. He walked from Devon to Anglesey, Mona, the place where the Druids arguably took their last stand. And it was a sacred pilgrimage for him, and it was around about 330 miles total. And I've just done 330 miles, and I'm going to do 600 more. So he did his, one of my elders, one of my mentors, I'm doing mine, and the next generation gets to do theirs. And we each get to just go a little bit further than those who came before us and leave a legacy that the ones that come next can go just a little bit further. Yeah. So that's why I'm doing this thing. You guys feeling me? Yeah. How you doing? Okay. It is so hard to, when you're kind of like at the cracking edge of like consciousness, to keep your shit together. It's really hard to kind of like hold the rhythm when you're touching places that are like emergent. Do you guys know what I'm talking about here? It's almost like being in a ceremony or a journey where you're like, oh my, you're really cracked open and trying to hold like a logical center. So I just wanted to name that. It's just struggled to hold a logical center in the middle of a rite of passage. But thank you for holding me as I try.